All right, we're back. We're live. What's up, everyone? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today, I'm joined by Reagan Rodriguez, calling in from Florida. Reagan, how you doing today?
I am doing better than I deserve. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
doing fantastic. The
Good.
kids are all coming home from school. We've got a 4-day long weekend ahead of us. Probably a dance party in store for the family. So I'm feeling good.
Yeah,
Um,
you'd say so. Yeah.
yeah. What about you? You got a good weekend ahead of you?
Uh, Gosh, I tend to sleep in on a Saturday, so that's always nice. Yeah. I have two choices. I could either roll over or roll out of bed, and rolling over is what I like to do on a Saturday.
Gotcha. So Reagan, why don't you
Yeah.
just maybe to kick it off, share a couple sentences on Fifth Avenue Capitol, what you guys are doing there, and then yeah, like I said, we'll put that topic aside after this, and then come back to it near the end of the interview.
Yeah. Well, I am fortunate in the fact that I help manage a foundation, and that foundation is made up of 26 what we call Uber Stratosphere Wealthy trustees. And the mission statement within that foundation is to fund projects that create jobs. Now, not just construction jobs, but sustainable jobs. So, our mission statement is to fund projects in underdeveloping countries. We specifically like things in alternative energy. So we like to fund projects where we know that there's a need. We also like areas where we know that we can stimulate the economy, right? That there's poverty in that area, and there are other principles that I go in and teach to help stimulate the economy through principles.
Interesting. That's very cool. So actually, I know I said that we wouldn't spend too much time on it, but I'm just curious. What countries are you operating in?
We are doing a solar project in Uganda. I don't know if you know this, I didn't know, but 90% of the people don't have power or electric in Uganda. From there, the president of Uganda referred me to the president of Tanzania, and we built a ethanol plant there. Corn grows like a weed over in Tanzania, or as they pronounce it, Tanzania. And then from there, I was referred to the Minister of Energy at in South Africa. We're doing a $550 million waste to energy project. Those are always my favorite, or the waste to energy that we do, where we take trash, convert that into energy. I've done that in India as well.
Oh, where in India?
Calcutta.
No way. My
Yeah.
That's where my parents are from. In fact,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. And I grew up visiting Calcutta every year, and now that my parents are retired, they spend the winter months there, and so they just came back actually a week ago. Interesting, very interesting. So, anyways, Reagan, so let's like I said, let's take it back a little bit if you're okay
Sure.
with that. I was going to ask
Yeah.
you, where did you grow up, and I guess what was your household like?
Oh, goodness. Uh, yeah, well, I grew up in the Midwest, specifically Ohio. So it's interesting that you mentioned I'm in Florida. I live in Miami. I don't know if you knew that Ohio kind of built the state of Florida. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, specifically more that Southwest Florida. So, for example, in America, there is this expression. I don't know if it's used that much in Canada, but the expression is keeping up with the Joneses. Have you ever heard that expression before?
Hmm.
Okay. Well, the way the entire state of Florida was built, because it used to just be swamplands. And there was
Mm.
this one guy named Rockefeller out of Cleveland, and he decided to build himself a winter home. And then there was this other guy out of Ohio named Edison, and he decided to do it as well. So what happened was that's why now Or that's why there were so many condos that were built, because the expression in Ohio was, instead of saying I'm keeping up with the Joneses, it was I'm keeping up with the Rockefellers. So now you could buy a small condo, which is what happened. They started building condos so that then people could say, oh, I'm headed to my winter home. Where's your winter home? Oh, I live where the Rockefellers and the Edisons, and then, of course, Dave Thomas, founder of Wendy's, built that there. So that's how Florida got to be built up. So if you were ambitious, you kind of like people when they move to New York to make it, especially if you work in finance, you know that the ultra wealthy go to South Florida or have winter homes there. So if you really want to make it, and I was young, what I would do is I'd fly there, couldn't even afford to stay in a hotel. And that's how things began. I would go to an upscale coffee shop. There was no Uber back then. So yes, I had to have the expense of renting the car, then driving back to the airport and flying back.
Interesting.
Yeah. I used to know a guy that used to sell custom-made suits. And he once said, people that are like that are successful, want to be around successful people. And I'm thinking, you're a door-to-door salesman, you're like cold calls people. How are you successful? And he goes, oh, well, what I do is when I call them up, I'll say, hey, how was your weekend? I was in my winter home. And I said to this guy, but do you really have a winter home? Well, no, but it helps me relate. And I thought, how often do you say that? He goes, well, on every cold call. And I'm thinking, so you lie 25 to 30 times a day? And he's like, well, it helps me to relate. And I once thought, I got a good idea. So what I did was I flew to Florida, and from the airport, I used my cell phone. I say, hey, how you doing? I'm in South Florida right now. How about yourself? You too? Gotta love the weather. I wasn't lying. I was outside at the airport making the call because I couldn't afford the rental of the car then, right? Then I flew right back. So I wasn't lying. I was in South Florida, and it got me around people like that. Just like the cold. How do you catch a cold? You hang around someone that has one. And I realized if I wanted to create wealth, I was going to get around those people that had it, and I just might accidentally catch what they have.
I love that. I love that. I actually came across this idea, like a similar idea, just, through the internet in the last week. Somebody was saying how they essentially built, like a very successful business by hanging out at the airport in the VIP lounge.
I like that idea.
All day, just hanging out there. And
I do lobbies of upscale hotels is what I used to do as
brilliant.
well.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's about,
I would check my email there. And also, speaking of, no lies. If I met somebody and they'd say, oh, where are you from? I wouldn't say Beverly Hills, California or something like that. I would say, oh, I actually happen to live in Miami, right? Like when I do it and they go, oh, you are nice. Oh, so are you visiting someone? Again, no need to lie. Why would you start a relationship that way? And I'd say, no, I actually came here to check email. Oh, well, why did you come here? Now let's continue in that.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, there's something there. So were you the entrepreneurial kid selling stuff at school, or did that come later?
I am so glad you asked that question. Do you know why? Because there is a study that has now recently been done on, and they say how much of a myth and or lie that is. Every person that wants to, it almost sounds like some dare to be great story. It's so very typical within the multi-levels. And what they actually found is the study is that young person that said, I was just a natural born salesman, they really don't end up being that successful person. So, for example, you look at a person like Jeff Bezos, he wasn't that natural born salesman as a kid. He wasn't that entrepreneur. So, no, to answer your question, no, I like reading. I like journaling. I like poetry. I'm a little more introverted than that, but I'm a good actor and I can act.
So you've been called a cultural pioneer for the integration of creativity and spirituality. So I guess where does that spiritual thread come from?
Oh, I like that. So I am more of an idealist versus a pragmatic. And also I really like things that kind of seem planned. Okay, so in other words, I like it when things come across like it could have been serendipitous, right? So I'll give an example. Let's assume, and I actually used to do this when I was, I think about in my early kind of 20s, I would do seminars and workshops, and people would come in, and this was years ago, where the people that would come in, they would put in their business cards. So then afterwards, you would think I would follow up with them. And what I would do if there were 20, 30 people in that seminar, later when I'd go home, I would lay all those business cards on the table. And you're like, oh, and you'd begin calling them to follow up and then close them, right? No. I would do this. I would put my hands on them and I would pray. And I would continue to pray. And then sometimes, actually, one time, phone rang right when that happened. Now you're saying, well, Reagan, that could have been a coincidence. Could have been, but I didn't know that. So I thought, what are the odds? So that's why I said one time that happened. Maybe it happened another time as well. But that created my own reality within myself. That I believe that belief is more than actual work. Right? Kind of like that Think and Grow Rich expression, what the mind can believe and conceive, it can achieve.
Definitely, I'm a believer in that. That's for sure.
We all know those people that work really hard and they don't do that well, right? Now, let's not deceive ourselves and think that we can do it without work. We do have to work, but we've got to believe and we've got to have the right attitude.
Yeah. Hey, so before Fifth Avenue Capital, you were deep in franchise consulting. So what pulled you into that world, and what did it teach you about business?
Here's how it got me into later doing acquisitions and bigger things. I had my first biggest largest kind of client. He was this big investor and he called himself a franchipreneur instead of an entrepreneur. And so he owned several franchises in different categories. And one day I said, why? Why is that? And this gentleman used to be a colonel in the military. And he said, if there was anything I learned in the military, and I'm like, yeah, what was it? And he says, if you're going to walk through the minefield, walk through the minefield after somebody. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, the franchise, they've got a system. They say, so, hey, I don't want risk, right? I don't want to start from scratch. We're going to walk through the minefield after somebody. The other thing, though, that I did learn from him is that he'd say, let's remember, there is an I in the word franchise, which means it is up to you. You do still have to do something. So that was my first, when I started in kind of acquisitions. From there, as I started selling franchises, those same people came to me and said, I now want to exit that franchise. And so then I had a bigger network of people that wanted to acquire businesses. And then from there, things grew into starting a venture capital firm and private equity and so on. Enough on that. Next question.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Um, yeah, so I was gonna ask you about you you so you talk about the seven institutions of society and essentially finding the one you're called to fight in. When did that framework click for you personally?
Let me just say that just like there are different seasons.
Uh-huh.
There are seasons within us as human beings, aren't there? And sometimes we might go through seasons where our work ethic may not be the best, and that's okay. I have felt at times where I was in a little bit of a slump, and that's okay. You're not quitting in life, right? You're still getting up. You just might be in a little bit of a slump. Well, if you talk to people that I knew somebody that was big in baseball, and he said, you know how you get out of a slump when you're in baseball? No, I wouldn't know. I never played, but he said, you keep swinging the bat. Well, that's the same thing in life. You're going to go through different seasons. You'll go through seasons where you'll even be a little pessimistic. And that's okay, because when you get out of it, I've noticed it just makes you even stronger, even better. So we talked about belief. I've had times you lose your belief and faith, and that's okay, because then it just becomes stronger. You mentioned you're married and have children. You know this happens if you've been married for a while, right? After you've been married, you might not, and then later what happens? You end up loving even more than you did at the beginning. It's phases in life. This is what I appreciate about seasons. That's why I live in South Florida, where we don't have seasons.
So let's Reagan, let's talk about the Fifth Avenue Underground Club. So you're teaching people to acquire companies with no money down. How does that actually work?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the trustees within the foundation that I've built good relationships with have children, and they want their children to not do what, unfortunately, a lot of children of wealth do. So they do ask me, hey, Reagan, will you help mentor my son or grandson that might be taking over this business? And so from there, that younger generation that I've been given this great responsibility of, I teach them how to acquire other businesses. So some of these people, their father or grandfather owned a mine. One specifically, their parents own one of the largest gold mines in Africa. I'd rather not say which country within Africa. So they're part of that 1%. And this person's been educated, was educated in London, went to boarding schools. Why did he go to those boarding schools? Because his parents didn't want him to see the slave labor around mining. So they get educated, they see it. And then they get older and they come to me and say, Reagan, I don't feel right that I'm going to be inheriting this mine that just is going to produce more slave labor. And I said, let's not feel guilty about the fact that you were born into wealth, because that's not going to help anyone. But let's be grateful that you're now starting to think and you're saying, what can we do differently? Let's continue on that, and let me help you on maybe acquire something else that fits into what you're looking for, that fits into your heart.
So then how does that work into the no money down thing? So
we do it more through seller financing. My goal is to do things win-win. So again, that person that says, I need $1 million to retire, that person, I just need that. And I want, you and I both know what's going to happen when they walk away with that 2 or 3 million, they're going to get taxed, the capital gains taxes. So what we do is say, look, we're going to negotiate with you. Oh, great. I wanted to walk away with 2 million. You're probably going to offer 1.5. And then when I say 1.6, you're going to, no. We say, we're going to negotiate up instead of down.
Got it.
Kind of giving away one of my trade secrets. So then they'll say, well, what's the catch? You're darn right, there's a catch. The catch is you're going to get that money over time.
Mm.
So if the person's selling for $1 million, we may offer them 1.3 million when we pay them over time. And what if after 2 years, the client, the person I'm helping says, you know what, Reagan, I want out. It wasn't what I wanted. That's fine. He can back out, and the seller isn't going to be mad at me because the money wasn't in escrow. He got that. He got a full-time employee that was thinking like an owner that he didn't have to manage. And so now someone new, and you know this in Canada where you live, how many people do you notice that own gas stations, convenience stores, and then you notice a new owner, and he may only last a year or two, and the old owner comes back here. That's because you realized I don't want to be open on the evenings or weekends, and 2 years later, he backs out, and the other owner says, no big deal. I'll find another idiot that wants to take over. Because when I call a retail store, come on, you're not going to ever create wealth with a retail store. You're open on the weekends, you're open in the evenings. You really can't scale it. You're only going to make so much.
Interesting. Well, definitely, like a world view that, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, and I'm learning a lot. Reagan, so I guess last question, what does a win look like 5 years from now for you and your business?
When you say a win, explain what that really means. Or maybe that's what you wanted me to say.
Well, I mean,
what do you really mean by a win?
So I guess, what is the vision? Like, where are you? Let's say we're doing another podcast 5 years from now. How could you look back and say, yeah, like this was a win, whatever you're trying to accomplish in terms of serving these high net worth individuals with the types of services you offer? Or maybe it's you sitting on the side of a beach. I have no idea what you tell me.
I'm gonna answer the question by saying consistency. Having your routine is a win. So think about this: if you had millions and were living off your interests, the win is that you still wake up at the same time. Why? Because you created this habit. See, some people think that habits are bad. Habits aren't bad. There's good habits and there are bad habits. You can either eat chocolates or you can eat vegetables. You can replace those habits. So a win is consistency, that routine. Wait a minute, Reagan, isn't that boring? I like boring because to most people, they don't. So it gives me that competitive edge. Bring on boring, all of it.
All right, sounds good, Reagan. So where do people learn more about you and your company? And help me land the plane.
Probably LinkedIn is a good way to find me. And I'm the only futurist. So if you type in Reagan Rodriguez, futurist, you'll find me.
Cool. Sounds good. We'll bring this one to a close. Thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, cheers.